What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things related to, I guess, truth-centered persuasion, truth-centered personal development and character development, truth-centered leadership, and everything revolving around character development, how to lead others in that character development process, and how to persuade and influence people at an individual level and at a group level. I'm fascinated by all of these topics, and so what I'm doing with part of this endeavor of discovering my feelings and thoughts on all of what I just said, truth-centered everything, is I'm seeking to document my study on the literature that I find most reflects like my own personal feelings, and that I want to most influence my way of viewing the world. And so right now I'm doing a study on the 7 habits of highly effective people and going literally page by page on that study, giving my own insights from my experience, but also just sharing insights that I'm learning in real time. It's been a fascinating endeavor for me. And for those that are listening and following along, I hope it will be for you as well and inspires you to do your own version of this. But whether people listen or not, I'm following Covey's advice to study the principles with the intent to teach so that they more fully and deeply ingrain themselves within me so that I can have, as Napoleon Hill says, a voluntary rebirth to the next best version of me. Okay, so we're going to get into habit 2. We've been studying, we just finished habit 1, we just started habit 2, and last session we talked a little bit about how to start to really discover for yourself the principles of beginning with the end in mind and what you most value as a person. Like, what are some of the things that you can do to start really underscoring, highlighting, or discovering the things that are most truth-based that you should value or that you desire to value so that you can start to align your life in line with true principles that are unchanging, as opposed to building a life off of things that are changing. Because when you can build your life on things that are unchanging, that allows you to adapt to change and thrive in it. And right now I'm on the side listening to and reading Stephen Covey's Principle-Centered Leadership book. And it's fascinating because when you apply these same principles of the 7 habits within an organization, what it does is it aligns that organization, starting with the individuals, on truth-centered principles that are unchanging, principles that exist outside of anything that we hope or believe or desire personally. They're intrinsically true, and they're as true as gravity is. And those are the principles that govern human relations. And so when you build an organization on those principles, because they're unchanging, it allows that organization to shift and be dynamic in a way that accommodates for all the changing environmental factors around it, or internal factors or market pressures, which is really fascinating. And so for a person and an individual, what I'm really loving about this study is that, like, habit 1 is really all about deciding that you are the creator of your life and owning the results currently and where you are currently, but also deciding that you can change the future results. You can do that by changing your paradigms, the way you view the world. Your attitudes and your behaviors will then flow from that change of view, and then your results will be a byproduct of your attitudes and behaviors flowing from a principle-centered way of viewing the world or paradigms. And that's a lot more complicated. You'll go back and listen to all the other my kind of discoveries there. But what comes next, once you decide and once you realize that you are the creator and you start to trust yourself and your ability to make and keep commitments, now we get to the part of, okay, now that you're the programmer and you're in charge, you're a proactive being intrinsically. Now you can write the program, and the best way to write the program for your life is to make sure that program is written based off of your life mission and your individual unique purpose and identity that is intrinsic, that exists outside of any organization or unit that you are a part of. It is intrinsic within you, and that's based on truth, right? Which is it's just all very not only fascinating but impactful. So now we're in habit 2, and we just did the eulogy exercise, which the eulogy exercise really allows you to connect to those things that you value most that are intrinsic within you. Something really fascinating is, I'll talk about this at the end, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He stated that at the top of the hierarchy of needs is an individual's desire to almost selfishly protect oneself. But Covey points out, and actually Maslow himself wrote this when he was on his deathbed, and there was a book published after he passed away where he admitted that his hierarchy of needs was actually broken, and that it was missing something, and that was something that was higher than self, and that was the desire for human beings to transcend self and to leave a legacy, which is like really powerful, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that. I'll circle back to that at the end as we go over some of these principles because I'm excited to get into this. Okay, we talked a little bit about the eulogy exercise, and as a recap, you can go listen to that because it's super powerful. But he says before you read further, take a few minutes to jot down your impressions. So you go do the eulogy exercise and then jot down your impressions. It will greatly increase your understanding of habit 2. So I'm assuming we kind of have done that a little bit. So next, what does it mean to begin with the end in mind? The reason why this is, habit 2 of now write the program. The programmer can now write the program. The best way to do that is to begin at the end and work backwards. If you participated seriously in the visualization experience of imagining you're at your own funeral, and then I have a little twist on it that it helps me, so you'll have to go back and listen to that. You touched for a moment some deep fundamental values. You established brief contact with that inner guidance system at the heart of your circle of influence. That inner guidance system, Covey believes, and I myself believes, that it stems from God. However, regardless of your belief in deity, we all have this inner guidance system that when we connect to it, it helps align us with the things we value most within our circle of influence. Consider the words of Joseph Addison. When I look upon the tombs of the great, every emotion of envy dies in me. When I read the epitaphs of the beautiful, every inordinate desire goes out. When I meet with grief of parents upon a tombstone, my heart melts with compassion. When I see the tomb of the parents themselves, I consider the vanity of grieving for those who we must quickly follow. When I see kings lying by those who deposed them. When I consider rival wits placed side by side, or the holy men that divided the world with their contests and disputes, I reflect with sorrow the astonishment on the little competitions, factions, and debates of mankind. Again, I'm reading this anew it's been a minute since I've actually read the words, and definitely not out loud, because I've read this about 30 times, like I've said, maybe more. But it's been a minute since the last couple of times I read it, I was skim reading while listening. And so it's cool to read, but you'll have to forgive my my hard time reading out loud. I reflect with sorrow and astonishment on the little competitions, factions, debates of mankind. So the things that don't actually matter, right? What we thought mattered when we were alive, but now when he's considering those that pass, what actually matters. When I read the several dates of the tombs of some that died yesterday and some 600 years ago, I consider that great day when we shall all of us be contemporaries and make our appearance together. Reflecting on what actually matters most, right? Kind of interesting. Although habit 2 applies to many different circumstances and levels of life, the most fundamental application of begin with the end in mind is to begin today with the image, picture, or paradigm of the end of your life as your frame of reference, or the criterion by which everything else is examined. So what he's really saying here, or at least my interpretation of it, is that this idea of beginning with the end in mind, or he's going to talk about here in a second the first creation and how everything is created twice. Anything that we encounter in our physical world is only the second version of that thing. It was first created in thought or in esoteric form before it made its way into the physical world, or before it was created by us into the physical world or by nature. And essentially, so what Covey's saying is, although this principle of beginning with the end in mind applies to everything in its physical form, meaning we can go apply the principle of goal setting and creation to anything. It's a universal principle. What he's saying is that it is what's the the most important application of the first creation, or of this idea of beginning with the end in mind, is trying to live each day based off of our desired result at the end of our lives. And when we examine that as the reference point of beginning with the end in mind, it fundamentally changes actually how we live and the meaning and purpose of our life, and it more accurately centers the way that we live on things that actually matter. I kind of have an interesting thing that I'm doing right now. So I have some pretty audacious goals for my career and for my impact within that career and purpose and meaning that align with my mission. I'm in the process of trying to make sure that all of the goals that I have for over the next 5 years align with my long-term mission of beginning truly with the end in mind. And the thing that I'm finding is that, like, I can go set a goal to, let's say, for example, sell $1 million of revenue for my company. I can go set that goal for myself. And I can have that goal completely detached from the things that, if I were to look deeply, I actually value. So let's say I just ignore all the things that I say I care about, but I want so badly the immediate results of servicing $1 million in sales revenue that that my short-term results of that goal totally dominate what it might mean for me long-term. So I fully would risk actually derailing my life from the things that I actually care about if I set that and let's just say that's an audacious goal compared to my peers or compared to my company. If I set that goal beginning with the end, meaning the end of the sales season, the moment I actually achieve it, if I set that goal with that end in mind, I fully risk not setting that goal based off of the things that I actually care about, and thereby discarding those things or even maybe ruining some relationships along the way. So what's interesting though is, like, and I'm actually actively doing this right now because I had this really audacious goal, and I do for over the next year and then 5 years and in my career in general. And I started setting this goal, and I started thinking, like, I could feel myself just really questioning, like, is this actually, like, right? Because just because a goal is good does not mean that it's right. And so I really was contemplating this, like, okay, what would this actually mean? I mean, the amount of time alone it's going to take me to achieve this audacious thing, like, what's going to happen to my marriage? What's going to happen to my friendships? Like, surely, and I'm even outlining in detail the blueprint and the schedule, right? And I'm like, surely this is going to affect all the other aspects of my life negatively if I achieve this goal. So I was really contemplating this, right? And at the same time, I was working closely with a good friend of mine who is getting ready to go serve a mission for my church, for our church, his church as well. And he had just come off of the sales season. He works for and with me, and he had just broken a company record. And so I started asking him, I was like, okay, how do you go, like, what's your view of this? Because we're very much on the same page of, like, wanting to be principle centered, I believe, at least. I was like, what's your view of this? Like, how do you make sure that you set, like, is there no room for achieving audacious goals if you're living in a principle centered way? Does that mean you have to, like, dial down your achievement? And he was like, no, because all you have to do is make sure that those audacious goals are set in line with your mission. And if you can align them with your mission and you find that it helps you achieve it, then that means that it passes the stress test of being a goal that is worth going after. And to the extent that you can set audacious goals in line with the very end, who you want to be at the end of your life and your unique contribution, your transcendence beyond you and yourself. And I get emotional even talking about it because it starts to get really powerful. What he was saying is you don't have to change the goal as long as it aligns with you becoming a better version of yourself that is more capable of being who you want to be at the end of your life. And so what I realized is, like, oh, I don't need to change the goal because all I have to do is just make sure that I am not only keeping in mind all the aspects of my life, but directly viewing it through the filter of how does my achievement of this audacious goal in my career, let's say, play into me living with more integrity in my marriage as I achieve it? What is the results of my marriage if I can go work with Sarah and plan with my spouse what this might mean for our family in the future? That's a very different outcome than if I disregard talking to her and I say, hey babe, I'm going to be gone for 5 months. You're not going to ever hear from me, but don't worry. I'm going to go do something awesome. And you might not care or know how it affects you, but like, let's hope it does, right? Instead, specifically planning in line with her how that might affect our family. And the immediate results of how it might affect our family, but also who I and our family will become as a result of being able to prioritize certain things along the way of building what our long-term vision is for our family and our legacy and our grandchildren and our, down the line once we pass. Like, that is a very different way of viewing audacious goals than disregarding them and beginning with the very short-term end in mind. I hope that kind of makes sense. And I'm fleshing these ideas out for myself as I go, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to start doing this. But I find that idea very, very compelling when it comes to how do you go make sure that when you achieve something audacious that it actually aligns with your purpose and helps you become the next best version of yourself. Make sure to actually begin with the fundamental end in mind, which is when I die, what contribution will I have made to the lives of my loved ones? Who will I have become? What actual legacy am I passing along that's truly meaningful, that I can account to God or whoever you believe you're going to account to, that I can account to them and say, you know what, this actually helped the generations of my family draw closer to truth, and so on and so forth, right? Anyway, so that's a long-winded way of just saying this has been a breakthrough thing for me. To begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you can better understand where you are now, and so that the steps you take are always in the right direction. So part of, habit one, being proactive, is developing the ability to be self-aware and say, where am I actually, right? But what I really like about habit two is once you realize that you are the creator of your life and that you have the power, and you realize how to take that power back and focus on your circle of influence, learn to make and keep commitments, trust yourself, live within your security, guidance, wisdom, and power, then it begs the question, like, where do I want to go? And where you want to go actually is irrelevant. Where you are now is actually irrelevant in context of where you want to go when you're deciding where you want to go. So, like, I don't base a decision off of where I'm going to take a summer vacation. Let's say I had limitless resources. I would not base my decision off of where I want to go vacation during the summer based off of where I currently am right now. I'm going to go decide regardless of where I am right now. But when it comes to building the blueprint of how to get there, then it's important for me to understand where my current residence is, because I will have to understand where I'm starting in order to get where I want to go. But when I'm deciding where I want to go, I think we fall into the trap of limiting ourselves and our ability to achieve the things that are most meaningful to us, and certainly grand and audacious relative to what the world is achieving. We limit our ability to do that if you're making decisions of where you want to go based off of where you currently are. It's important to recognize and own where you are, but when you're setting the goals themselves, or when you're going through the process of beginning with the end in mind, I don't think it's helpful to acknowledge where you currently are until you've decided where you want to go. Then it's fundamental to acknowledge where you are. Okay, so like for example, okay, so again, if I go and I'm coaching a salesperson, I'm saying, hey, listen, what do you want? What do you want to achieve during the sales season? I'll say, yeah, I think I can. Whenever they start saying that, they're basing what they want based off of where they currently are and their current limitations and abilities. And if I say, yeah, okay, so let's just say you have 6 months to prepare, though, you're not going to be the same person. I mean, fundamentally, even the cells in your body will likely all have replaced themselves, and you are not the same person. So why would you base what you want to achieve off of who you currently are? That doesn't make actually a ton of sense unless you don't want to become someone that's drastically different or more capable than you currently are. If you want to be incrementally different or more capable, then sure, do that. But I think if you really want to have that quantum change that Covey talks about, it's helpful to develop the skill set to say, like, okay, what do I want based off of where I currently am? Or excuse me, not based off of where I currently am. What do I want in my future, regardless of where I am currently, believing that I fundamentally can and will be a different person. I don't have to be limited by who I am or where I've come from. All of those are sunk costs anyway, so let's just put that aside for a second. What do I actually want? What's actually most important? And again, the eulogy exercise helps with this, but okay, sorry, I'm rambling now. It's incredibly easy to get caught up in an activity trap, in the busyness of life, to work harder and harder at climbing the ladder of success, only to discover it's leaning against the wrong wall. That's so powerful. It is possible to be busy, very busy, without being very effective. I'll just finish that thought that I had about setting your goals not in context of where you are. So I think what's most helpful actually is to say, what if I could have anything that I truly want, what would it be, based off of hopefully having done this exercise of like, what is my unique mission in life and what do I value most based on true principles. That's I think the best way to start. Push aside all limitations and current status and say like, what do I actually want? And then from there build your goals, and then go, and because there's a process of being able to convince yourself that I'll go over in this first creation blueprint process. Okay, people often find themselves achieving victories that are empty, successes that have come to at the expense of things they suddenly realize were far more valuable to them. People from every walk of life, doctors, academics, actors, politicians, business professionals, athletes, and plumbers, often struggle to achieve a higher income, more recognition of a certain degree of professional competence, only to find that their drive to achieve their goal blinded them to the things that really mattered most and now are gone. That's powerful. And rewind a few seconds to see, how my original thoughts on that. That is really interesting. How different our lives are when we really know what is deeply important to us. And keeping that picture in mind, we manage ourselves each day to be and to do what really matters most. If the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster. We may be very busy, we may be very efficient, but we will also be truly effective only when we begin with the end in mind. If you carefully consider what you wanted to be said of you in your funeral experience, you will find your definition of success. One of my strongest mentors in my life that I most look up to, Jason Walton, talks about this a ton, is when he often opens the room for questions, and this man is very successful, incredibly wealthy, but also just an incredibly good person. And you can tell genuinely seeks to be a principle-centered human being. So one of the things that he says is like, well, people will ask him questions like, how did you have so much success? Like I actually hate the word success because, and Jason has so, in a way taught me to hate it because of what I'm about to say. And always he shoots back and says, well, that depends on what you define as success. If you define making money as success, I can tell you what that is, but you got to be really careful of how you define success. That could be actually the most dangerous thing that you do for your life, is define success the wrong way. Fascinating and really interesting. So every step that we take, if we haven't defined success with beginning with the end in mind, like Covey says, every step we take up the ladder of quote unquote success just gets us to the wrong place faster. If you carefully consider what you wanted to be said in the funeral experience, you'll find your definition of success. So that actually helps us accurately define success. It may be very different from the definition you thought you had in mind. Perhaps fame, achievement, money, or some of the other things we strive for are not even part of the right wall. When you begin with the end in mind, you gain a different perspective. One man asked another man on the death of a mutual friend, how much did he leave? His friend responded, he left it all. And then next time we're going to go over the idea of all things being created twice, which I'm really excited about. And you'll have to tune in for that one because that one's going to be super good. This is like, of all the things that I've found that I can personally identify as what has resulted in like outward tangible results for me and for the people that I've worked with, and meaningful results, really, it's come from these principles of the first creation. Assuming that the person is reasonably proactive, which we all are on a spectrum somewhere trying to get better, right? So look forward to that next one. I'm just going to do a quick little summary of my learnings today. So give me just a second here. Yeah, so just a quick little learnings of little summary of my learnings today. First and foremost, the principle of beginning with the end in mind is completely the crux of making sure that you set goals in the context of living a meaningful life. Beginning with the end in mind means starting and living each day, understanding the context of your life and what you value most. One of the quotes that I most love from Covey from the learnings today is, if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster. And we can be very busy, we can be very efficient, but we'll also truly be effective only when we begin with the end in mind, which in his in 7 Habits, he talks about beginning with the end in mind, meaning beginning from the context of the eulogy, your funeral, your unique contribution in life. I'll just state quickly, one of the things that is most powerful to me about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that Maslow gave his hierarchy of needs, stating that the highest level of need of a human being is their desire to for self-actualization, I think is what he calls it. Actually, what is it specifically called? It's called self-actualization. So that was the highest in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But Maslow, on his deathbed, even recognized that his hierarchy was incomplete. And so a book came out after his death called Toward the Higher Reaches of Human Nature. And in that, Maslow described that what he believed after being on his deathbed experience, as about to pass on, he actually described that there is something greater than self-actualization, than fulfillment of self, and that is the self-transcendence or legacy. That we all have a need to actually leave something meaningful behind, and that we should start. So Covey then says we should start by trying to live in line with what we want our legacy to be, our great spiritual need within our soul. Kind of interesting thought. So I'm going to leave you guys with that for today, and I'll see you guys in the next one where we talk about All Things Are Created Twice. Freaking cannot wait for that. Make sure that you subscribe or follow me on any of the channels here. Leave comments of things that you like, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.